Good morning. Welcome. Thanks for tuning in to our online broadcast here at the West Visalia Church of Christ. It's great to know that all over the city today and even all over our area, we have people gathered together in their own homes, but enjoying this time of spiritual connection. What we're going to be doing this morning is I'm going to go over some of our announcements as a congregation so that you can know what's going on and maybe some updates of some people that you can pray for. So we'll go over those announcements. And then after the sermon, Brother Greg Knight's going to lead us in our prayers for the communion. And then, you can choose to participate in the song service online too and go about your business today. But by way of announcements today, let me remind you of some urgent prayer requests that we do have. We're trying to stay in touch with everybody. We're making a lot of phone calls and checking in on people. And because of that, we're hearing about some specific needs. So we want to keep Brother Cal Heddick in our prayers. He did have a stent put in this last week, and there is some difficulty going on with that. So keep Brother Cal Heddick in your prayers. I know Edna Eichert is currently in ICU. She has a blockage due to her dialysis port, and she has very low blood pressure at this time, and she's requesting prayers. So keep Edna Eichert in your prayers. And then many have asked about the residents there at Redwood Springs, the nursing home here in Visalia that has had the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. From our understanding right now, two of our church members, Bill Ajun and Sam Loveland, have both tested positive for that illness. As of right now, it seems like they're not showing any symptoms, but they did test positive. But because of, other health issues, we are definitely worried about them. And then other people have family members there in Redwood Springs, and we care about our community, and we're worried about those there. Some other updates on the sick. John and Carissa Couch are feeling much better and are now at home with Luke. So we're glad to know that God answered our prayers in that regard. Some other serious announcements. We've had two deaths that are close to the congregation. I got word that on Friday morning, our brother Sammy De La Rosa passed away. We know that he's had a long-fought battle with health issues for a long time. Our heart goes out to the De La Rosa family and all those connected there. We're definitely going to miss our brother in Christ, but we know that when a faithful brother passes from this life, that there's something more out there. There's something better to go to, and we pray that he finds comfort and peace now and that his family does as well. But our sympathy goes out to the family of Sammy De La Rosa. And then we also want to keep Brother Steve Cole in our prayers. His uncle, Earl Chapin, passed away on Tuesday, April the 14th. He'd been on hospice care for about a week, but we want to pray for his wife, Joyce, and the rest of the family that are connected there. Our hearts go out to the Cole family. As by way of questions about upcoming events and things, as you're aware, our normal congregational events have pretty much been canceled and have been replaced with a digital form. People keep asking me about Bible camp. What's going to happen with that? Truthfully, we don't know right now. We have to kind of wait and see what, regulations are kind of being passed down to us. Maybe we're going to do a smaller camp. Maybe it's not going to happen. Maybe it'll be the normal camp. Right now, we're still acting like it's going to happen, but we just don't know. Our plan is to make a final call on that at the beginning of May. As for when we're going to come back to worshiping here at this location, again, we don't know about that too. Most likely, it's going to be that we can kind of ease back into it with smaller groups. So maybe we'll do some in-home worship services, or maybe we'll do our care groups here at the church building. We want you guys to get back together as soon as possible. We want our church members to be able to be around their church family. So we're going to do everything that we can to make that happen and still being safe and wise and keeping with some of the requirements that are being laid out, on us. One other update too, it's here in the bulletin. People have asked about the church budget and how we're doing there. I will tell you, we are down in our giving, and we understand that was going to happen. There's people out of work right now. There's a lot of fear and apprehension. So because of that, we assume that there'd be, lower giving. But we do want to let you know that from a budgetary standpoint, for the last several weeks, really throughout the whole beginning of this year, every week we weren't meeting our budget or what we were hoping for through contribution. And then these last several weeks with us being, kind of in social distance mode, it's definitely been a lot lower. So if there's a way that you can give more, you can help out with that, please do. Remember, you can always give by mailing in a check, by dropping it off here at the church, or by doing it online at wvcoc.org/give. And really, even beyond that, look for ways to give in your own life. There's a lot of people in need right now, and we want to make sure that we meet their needs. Well, let's talk about then our lesson this morning. one of the things that we've been talking about for the last several weeks is this idea of how we can find hope when feeling helpless. A lot of us feel helpless right now, and rightly so. And what we've been doing is we've been digging into the book of Ecclesiastes, which is a beautiful book, but it's very much a raw and emotional book. It is a book about a man trying to figure out life, and that man is Solomon. Solomon is looking at life and going, okay, is there meaning to any of this? Why am I here? What's my purpose? What am I supposed to do next? In fact, the book of Ecclesiastes, the way I described it is about what to do when you don't know what to do. It can be kind of depressing. It can also be kind of repetitive, but it's designed to be that way. It's raw, it's emotional, it's gritty. So here Solomon is looking at his life, looking back at his life after living a life of excess, and he says, okay, what's the meaning of life? So then he lists out all these different things that he thought would give his life meaning. And at the end of all of it, he says this. He says, utterly pointless, says the teacher, absolutely pointless. Everything is pointless. Now, that's kind of a negative look at it, kind of a Debbie Downer way of looking at life, but I do know where he's coming from. Because we try to do all sorts of things, and a lot of times we fail, and because of that, we kind of vent like Solomon did. But what I want to encourage you today is don't feel helpless. There is hope. We do not have to stress so much. We don't have to be overwhelmed with anxiety. We don't have to be crippled by fear. There is hope. But fear is very much a human tendency. We are worriers. And I think that's one of the things that make us maybe a little bit different from the animal kingdom. Of course, we have all sorts of differences, but the way we think is the big difference. Let me give you an example. A while back, we picked up a new puppy. There he is on the screen right there. That's Henzo. Henzo likes playing with that soccer ball in the backyard until I accidentally kicked it over the fence, a few days ago. But Henzo is a neat dog. He likes to play. He's friendly. But Henzo has developed a little irritation in his ear, like an ear infection or something that's being treated. But Henzo, as a dog, the way he deals with the discomfort in his ear is he itches it constantly with his foot. He's done it so much that he's made his own ear bleed in the place where it's not hurting. He's having discomfort on the inside, but his instinct is to just keep scratching, and we're having to put medicine on it and make sure that he doesn't do that because he's damaging himself further. He can't see beyond the immediate feelings of gratification that come from scratching his ear, even to the point that he's actually hurting himself and making it worse. But he's an animal. We don't expect him to think, broad scope. We don't expect him to think about the future. Animals don't normally think about the long-term consequences of their actions. They don't do that. We do as humans. Hopefully we do. Sometimes we look back at the consequences of our actions and learn from them. But that's what makes us different than the animals. We have, a sense of wonder. Animals don't really do that, but we can be in awe. We can appreciate beauty. We can appreciate art. And we also have a desire to know and to understand. We're like, you know what? I want to understand this concept. I want to grasp this idea. My pet never wonders, hey, I wonder how my dog food is made. He doesn't research that. He just wants it in his dish. Now, I might research where did the dog food come from? Is it healthy? What is it made out of for him? Is it the best for him? I might research that, but he's not going to do that. He doesn't have a desire to know and to understand. He doesn't have drive and ambition. He might have a desire that's been programmed in him through kind of reward, Pavlov's dogs type situation where he wants to please me. I'm his owner and he likes it when I am affectionate toward him, so he might do things that he knows will result in that. But at the same time, he doesn't have drive and ambition. And my dog doesn't have the ability to wonder why. He doesn't look at this life and go, I wonder what it would be like not to be a dog. Why am I here? What is my purpose? He doesn't do that. But we as humans do. We have the ability to wonder why. And that is one of our greatest strengths, but it's also something that can be crippling at times. And I think that's what we see here with Solomon. Solomon is looking at life and he's asking why and what and how so much that he's almost paralyzed by it a little bit. And we do that too. We'll ask questions like, why am I here? Or why did God make me? Is there a God? Or how can I be happy? What is good and what is evil? What is right and what is wrong? Is there meaning to any of this? Am I wasting my life? Is this all there is? Those are the questions that Solomon was asking. And those are the questions that we often ask too. And those questions are the most difficult questions in life. They're the questions that cause us anxiety. They're the questions that keep us up late at night. Well, as Solomon asks these questions in this book, at the end, he gives his conclusion and his answer. And I was telling one of the brothers, a couple days ago that I felt like in preparing for this lesson that I'm just kind of repeating myself. Well, that's what the book of Ecclesiastes does. It repeats itself over and over again. But the idea is that every time Solomon asks a question, the same answer is there. And every time we ask a question in life, every time we wonder why, the same answer comes out. But it's not always the answer that we want to hear, although it's the answer that is always in front of us. So what is that answer? Well, Solomon gives that answer at the end of the book in chapter 12. And what he tells us in chapter 12 is that the answer kind of hurts a little bit. And the truth hurts sometimes, doesn't it? So here's what Solomon says about the answer he's going to give. He says, the words of wise men are like goads, and masters of those collections are like well-driven nails, and they are given by one shepherd. So Solomon says, look, when I went on a journey to try to find truth, I found it, but it hurt. In the same way that a whip on a horse or a goad on oxen, that kind of idea that causes that pain temporarily but directs your path, the truth hurts, right? Solomon says the truth that I found is like spurs on cowboy boots. They hurt for a moment, but they direct you where you need to go. You need to hear it, right? That's what Solomon says about this truth. But what's so neat about this truth that he discovered is that he discovered it after a life of pain. Now you might think, well, I thought Solomon had a life of pleasure. Well, he did fill his life with pleasure. He tried to fill his life with every kind of excess that you could think of. But after doing that, after having lots of wives, concubines, riches, palaces, parks, everything you can imagine, after having all of that, he looks back and says that same line that we've been seeing over and over again in the book. He says, that was all pointless. That was not the answer that I needed. But when we read a book like Ecclesiastes, we often ask, like Solomon did, is life pointless? Is Solomon correct? Is it all worthless? Does it not matter? Well, I don't think life is pointless. I think there is a point to life. But the problem is that we go down the same path of discovery that Solomon did instead of learning from his mistakes. Because think about what Solomon did here in this book. Solomon looks at his entire life, and he's a wise man. Wisest who ever lived, although he doesn't always follow the wisdom that he's blessed with. Solomon looks over his life and he says, here's all the places I tried to find joy. He talks about trying to find joy and pleasure. He says, nope, that's pointless. Solomon talks about trying to find meaning from work. Have you ever known somebody that makes their whole existence about work? That's how they find their value as a human being? Solomon says that's pointless too. Well, what about earthly accomplishments? Maybe about reaching some kind of goal. Solomon says, that was pointless. Solomon says, I tried to find meaning in competition. I like competition. These last few months, there were some tournaments that I was looking forward to going to. My son Owen and my kids, they were looking forward to going to some of these tournaments and competing. And now they can't. And there's a feeling of emptiness there. But Solomon says even competition can be pointless. Riches, oh man, if I had the money of so-and-so, then I'd be happy. Solomon says that was pointless. Trying to make people happy can be pointless. In fact, Solomon goes on and says that I even looked at death. Okay, maybe death is the answer. Solomon says that too is vanity. That too is pointless. So what's the point of life then? If Solomon says everything is pointless, what's the point of anything? Here's what I think the book of Ecclesiastes is trying to tell us. Life's point is to point us toward God. Everything in life is. Good or bad. Whether God appointed or, circumstantial, whatever it is. I think everything in this life is designed to point us toward God. Let me say that again. Life's point is to point you, to point me, to point us toward God. And that's what the book of Ecclesiastes teaches us. Ecclesiastes chapter 12, we already started there looking at verse 11 and onward, but let's look at the end of this. Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 9, Solomon says, I tried to find the answers. Verse 11, Solomon says the answer was kind of painful. And then in verse 13, here's what Solomon says. Here's the big answer to all of it. He says, the conclusion, when all has been heard, is fear God and keep his commandments, because this applies to every person. Solomon says that's the point of everything, is to get us to fear God and to keep his commandments. Now that might sound a little bit repetitive, because Solomon has kind of been coming back to this over and over, because nothing else found meaning. This is the only thing that does give life meaning. Life's point is to point us toward God. And Solomon, looking at a life that fulfilled every kind of indulgence you could think of. Solomon had every resource at his disposal. He tried it all, and he says, none of that worked. The only thing that gave life purpose was this right here. The conclusion, when all is said and done, is fear God and keep his commandments. And look at the last part of verse 13. Because this applies to every person. Every person. Even today, in the year 2020, in the United States of America, in the midst of a global pandemic, same thing. Fear God and keep his commandments. That's what applies to us. So we look at even our own current situation. There's a lot of fear right now. There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of stress. And we think, well, yeah, but what if we run out of, what if it turns out that this illness that people are getting infected with was actually some kind of plot or some kind of carelessness in a lab or some kind of whatever? Doesn't matter. Did it point you toward God? Hopefully it did. Life's purpose is to point us toward God. That's the point of life. Yeah, but what if the economy collapses? What if my retirement account is drained? What if the dollar has no more value? Point yourself toward God. Allow life to point you toward God. My wife oftentimes reminds me of this kind of thing when I'm stressed out about something. She goes, did you pray about it? Have you thought, meditated upon it? Maybe thought about what God said about it? Sometimes we don't. We allow situations that we're in to overwhelm us, and instead of allowing them to point us toward God. What about the fact, I've heard people say, yes, but you don't understand. If this illness gets really bad, it's going to overrun hospitals, and we hope it doesn't. We don't want to see people sick. We don't want to see hospitals, depleted with all their supplies. We don't want to see people lose their retirement accounts. We don't want to see governments and countries fighting over this. We don't want any of that. But even if that does happen, it should point us toward God. One thing I've seen floating around a lot online is in times of fear and anxiety, people gravitate toward all sorts of weird ideas, right? They go, what if, Cliff? What if this is all one big conspiracy designed to manipulate and control and do this or that? It might be, but you know what? We need to let it point us toward God. No matter what happens, life's point is to point us toward God. Even if the world as we know it completely changes, we're still supposed to be pointed toward God. There is no promise of peace and prosperity in this life, but there is a promise that if we serve God, we can spend eternity with him. So that's why Solomon says the conclusion, when all is said and done, is fear God and keep his commandments. Now you may be thinking, but Cliff, I thought you said not to be afraid. You just said don't fear all these different things, but now you're telling me to fear God? If people might say, well, Cliff, isn't fearing God bad? No. See, the fear that he's talking about here is not this idea of, oh no, woe is me, I got to stay underneath my covers in the bed because the boogeyman's going to get me kind of fear. It's not a crippling kind of fear. But fear in and of itself does not have to be bad, but it can be. And I saw a neat way of looking at this. Think about what happens when maybe you turn on the news. You go to a website, CNN.com, FoxNews.com, some news website, or you turn on your favorite news channel, and you read about everything that's going on. And you hear about certain things and you get afraid. One preacher pointed it out to me in a sermon I was listening to, and I thought this was powerful. Fear lets us know who is in control of our lives. What causes us fear is usually what we are allowing to control us. So if it's the news, then the news is controlling you. If you're afraid every time you open up your bank account, then your money is controlling you. If you're afraid because of a certain person, that person is controlling you. Fear lets us know who is in control of our lives. But we don't want other people or other things or externals to control us. The person we want in control is our Lord. The person we want in control is God. So during this time of helplessness, don't feel helpless, because there is hope. And hope will come from letting God be in control. See, when you fear God, you're letting God be in control. And when you let God be in control, then you're free to do His will. And when you do that, you will find hope. Fearing God is not bad. When you fear God, you say, you know what, God, you're in charge. The media is not in charge. The government's not in charge. All of my fears, all of my anxieties, all of my worries, they're not in control of me. You're in control of me, God. And I'm going to just do your will and trust in you. And as human beings, we have an ability to come to grips with that. Animals can't do that, but we can. We have a desire to know and to understand. We have a desire to figure things out. Sometimes we can't figure everything out, but that's okay. We can't figure out how to fix every situation. Right now, I've been stressed lately thinking about what can I do to help the church during this time? What can I do to make sure that people, are still connected to God? What can I make sure that people don't fall away? What if people, after they've been separated from this community for a while, don't come back? What if we can't do camp again? What if people struggle in their faith because they can't come to camp? All of those things, I worry about that. I'm sure you do too. But you know what? There's some things that I can't figure out. But what I can do is always fear and follow God. Not a fear that's crippling, but a fear that says, God, I'm going to let you be in control because I know that you're mightier than I am. And when we fear and follow God, we can find hope and peace even during a difficult season of life. Because life's point is to point us toward God. So whatever situation you're in right now, whatever struggles you have in your life, whatever fears, whatever anxieties, cast them on God. Trust Him. Let Him be in control, and let everything in life point you to Him so that you can serve Him with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind. We are blessed to be children of God. We're blessed to have a Heavenly Father that loves us. Let's live for and serve Him.